Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Team DLW Unity Movement here on the J. King Radio Network, and I'm your host, Mr. DLW.
And this is Sister Angela Sales, promoting financial unity for the global Black community.
So, yes, indeed, we definitely have one heck of a show lined up for everybody today. Sister Angela, can you tell us what we have in store for everybody on today's show?
Well, today the Team DLW Unity Movement welcomes back one of our most influential leaders of today in the Black community, in the light of the Prince of Pan-Africanism. He is a scholar who's here today to discuss education, elevation, and motivation, and other important topics that we're going to discuss, including lack of respect for our elders today. We're going to touch on brotherhood and manhood, and how do we actually promote unity among all us brothers and sisters. And so we look forward to the Prince of Pan-Africanism joining us here today.
And what we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, is going to introduce you to a man who pretty much needs no introduction here on the Team DLW Unity Movement. And he's been here before a couple times on our show, and he is coming back for the third time here on the Team DLW Unity Movement. And he's known as the Prince of Pan-Africanism. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm welcome, a warm Team DLW Unity Movement welcome to Dr. Umar Johnson. Welcome.
Peace and love, Black Power. Thanks for having me on the show. Glad to be back.
Welcome to the show, brother. How are you?
All is well, my brother. Thanks for having me.
Indeed, indeed. And you definitely got to greet our queen here, Sister Queen Angela Sales.
Peace and love.
Say hello, Angela.
Peace, Doc. How you doing?
All is well.
Welcome. Welcome to the Team DLW Unity Movement.
All right, all right. Well, you know, sir, I know we got a lot of things, a lot of topics to talk about, and let's just jump right on into it. You know, one of the first things that I understand that you probably start the majority of your lectures or a lot of your speeches on is education, and you focus on the ADHD of how our kids are being diagnosed. Can you give us a little bit of your theory behind that ADHD and how that relates to our children?
Certainly. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is a psychiatric diagnosis that was introduced into the world in 1980. And that date is very significant because we also know that in 1980, the CIA dropped crack cocaine off in the Black community. So in essence, you had a drugging of Black adults at the same time that you had a drugging of Black children. 1980. In 1987, the diagnosis was changed from attention deficit disorder, ADD, which is what it was in 1980, and it became attention deficit hyperactivity disorder in 1987. One of the reasons why we saw a change in the nomenclature of the disorder is because so many Black fathers have been removed from the home, leaving Black mothers in a position to have to raise boys on their own and also teach them discipline. So rather than focusing on the cause of this problem of so-called inattention and hyperactivity, which was in essence fatherlessness, the drug company simply swooshed in with the American Psychiatric Association, and they began to, ostracize normal Black boy behavior by calling it a disease to be hyper or inattentive, which is something that all boys have always been in any race, culture, or class since the beginning of history. So they found a way to get paid off of fatherless Black boys, and that problem has mushroomed from 1980 to 1987, and now 2018, we've had about almost 40, going on 50 years of the misdiagnosing and outright drugging of black boys, largely being influenced by racist white teachers and uneducated black mothers.
Indeed, indeed. And you know, Dr. Umar, when I have 25 years experience working with nonprofit organizations, and during that time working with a lot of the kids that came through the county and foster parents, a lot of these kids passed through exactly that whole gateway right there, that pipeline, where they were just funneling them and giving them all these Ritalin pills and, you know, keeping them doped up. And, you know, I advocated against that because I saw the comatose state of mind that these kids were in, and it didn't seem to help them at all, except calm a lot of that energy that they had. And I thought if it was refocused, if we were able to refocus that energy in a different way, then we would be able to help these kids blaze their trail and tap into their creativity and their uniqueness, along with helping them develop the proper way. Now, with that being said, can you talk to us a little bit about the school that you're looking to set up in order to combat these problems that we're having in public schools and other school systems, rather than going a different route? Homeschooling is another opportunity that some people can take as well. But can you talk to us about that and the progress of that particular project?
Yes, let me first preface my statement by saying that black boys don't need anything special. So much has been made of the maladjusted uniqueness of black boys. So much has been made of the delinquent uniqueness of black boys, of the violent disposition of black boys. And all of this is nothing but racist conjecture. The black boy can sit still. He can learn as well as any other child. He doesn't need anything special. The reason why everyone is coming up with all these special programs for black boys is because it is financially lucrative. So everyone wants to look as if I have the solution for black boys. The Frederick Douglass and Marcus Garvey Academy, which is the school that I'm building, is a school that's going to provide black boys basically with what they need. Number one, an environment that is free from white people who dictate their academic engagement, the curriculum, the instruction, and the consequences of the school. The public school is a white racist institution. Even if the principal is black, even if every teacher is black, which is rare, most teachers in predominantly black schools are white, which is a contradiction that has never been dealt with since school desegregation back in 1954. But the black boy simply needs to be put in an environment where he's not stigmatized, labeled, marginalized, okay, or treated with punitive discipline practices. You give any black boy that and he will thrive. So at the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy, we seek to give him that. We seek to give him positive heterosexual black male role models as teachers in the classroom. But most importantly, we seek to give him a political education, which is something that a lot of African-centered schools don't even give their children because they're afraid of white backlash. A political education means that our boys must understand racism, how it operates, how to overcome it. A political education means that black boys must understand the political and economic time of day for African people, where we are, how we out of our situation. And unfortunately, a lot of African-centered scholarship deals only with the black past, but it doesn't deal with how we recreate a black future. And so Fdmg is not only about knowing the past, but it's about understanding we cannot live there. No matter how great we were in Kemet, no matter how great we were in Nubia, no matter how great we were in Timbuktu, no matter how great we were in the ancient kingdoms of Monomotapa, that means nothing unless you're going to take that energy and use it towards creating a new reality for black people. And that's what we seek to do, recreating the African reality by recreating the consciousness of black boys.
I love that. I love it. And we follow pretty much the same concept here. We're all about solutions and what has worked in the past. and utilizing that experience and those teachings in order to do better and move forward for the future.
And let me say this, Brother Darrell, real quickly.
Indeed.
On that topic of solution, the reason why we have not been able to get out of this matrix that we've been trapped in for the past 50 years, going back to Dr. King, and then 150 years going back to a Frederick Douglass, one of the reasons we haven't been able to get out of the matrix is because no one wants responsibility for implementation of the solutions. That's why if you look at Black consciousness today, it is largely conversation, dialogue, social events. It is very superficial and celebratory, because when you look at the quote-unquote conscious leaders, whether it's the elders, the youth, whether it's those of us who have formal education or those of us who are self-educated, no one wants the responsibility for nation building. No one wants the responsibility for institution building. No one wants the responsibility for financial and political discipline. No one wants that. And so what happens is we deal with all of the superficial aspects of nation building, but we never get into the practical aspects of nation building, because that takes time, that takes money, that takes effort, that takes sacrifice, and a lot of that work cannot be done in plain sight. It must be done to some degree in a confidential setting. And because we live in the YouTube era, in the Facebook generation, and the social network millennium, even Black conscious brothers and sisters have been caught up in the narcissism of social media, which basically means they're not interested in doing any work that cannot be seen by other people live on the internet.
And I hear you. I hear you when you say that, brother. I do. I really hear that. But don't you think there's enough of us that are with the same consciousness, the same understanding of what some of the solutions are? There's some of us are unified and working together for that overall goal, and that's to put together a system where we put all egos aside and all differences aside to work for that common goal. I've done it in a small circle of which, and it's being done in a small circle in which I'm involved in, and we're looking to expand that, because I think if we connect the dots, across not just the city, the state, the country, across the globe, it'll be enough of us who are actually doing it. And we're not, now the reason for a show like this, of course, is always to educate, elevate, and motivate our listeners to that higher level of consciousness and awareness, which empowers them and uplifts our communities around the world. We say that every show, and I mean that, because these are the people that we are gathering together to create that type of unity. And the major part of that is
you're an exception because
that may be true. That may be true.
Yeah.
This is the question that I'm getting to.
There's work that comes after your media. There's work that comes after your broadcast. There's work that comes after the dissemination of the information. And there's a few other brothers and sisters in Black media who are also workers. But I would have to argue that most of our media minds today, they're not really working. Everything is simply about the conversation without the collaboration that needs to come afterwards. But this is the one point I wanted to make. I agree with you. There's enough of us who want it. Ironically, here's what I find. In the sea of Black consciousness, you have those who are serious, who are to some degree being distracted from connecting with the others who are serious, because they're constantly being bombarded by those who are woke. But you have this big ocean of woke people. Let's say you got 10 million woke Africans in America. They're woke. But amongst those 10 million woke Africans, you may have 1 million who are worker Africans. See, you can be a woke African, but are you a worker African? A lot of us are woke, but we're not workers. We're not motivated to make a difference. And so you may be in one seat, being totally surrounded by woke Africans. I'm in another seat, totally surrounded by woke Africans. You and I need to connect But the problem is, and they're not doing it on purpose, but we're being distracted because I can't see you and you can't see me. Because standing between you and I, 2 worker Africans, are 2 million woke Africans who just want to keep on intellectually masturbating the historical information. And so within that sea, the workers have to find a way to reach each other so we're not being distracted by all the woke people who don't want to do any work.
And that identifies the problem. Now let's identify the solution. How do we unify brothers around this country to unify, to get to that point where they understand what our common goals are and willing to work together, as you say, not just being woke, but being able to work together in order to get things done? That's a question I pose to you, and then after that, I'm going to go to my co-host, Angela Sales, who have a couple of questions.
Certainly, great question. I would say one of the things we have to do, because and one of the things that we have always been criticized about, both within the race and outside of it, and I would have to agree with the accuracy of the criticism, is our organizational skills. And what I mean by that is not only do we have to find a way to bring people in, but we have to find a way to deter people who are not coming with the right interests. So, for example, in my work, I've had trouble keeping elements out of the work who are only there to capitalize upon it for personal reasons. So when we talk about bringing those workers together, we have to make sure that when we drop that net in the ocean to pick up the workers, that we don't pull up a net with 2 million woke people who don't want to work. So part of the strategy of bringing in the workers has to contain a sub-strategy to keep out the woke people, because the great majority of black people in consciousness desire no responsibility for nation building. It's a contradiction, because we're always posting on Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat and Facebook about how we want revolution, but the truth of the matter is the first letter in revolution is R, and that R stands for responsibility. There is no revolution without responsibility, but most woke people want no responsibility. And so one of the things I'm actually working on now, and I've been working on it for a couple months now, is how do I drop that net in the sea of black consciousness and pull out more workers than woke people. And so that's what I'm working on, because even in my own organizations, I haven't done a good enough job keeping people out who just want to be there but not necessarily do the work. And so that's something that we all have to get better at, because it's keeping us from getting to the essential job of African racial reconstruction.
I definitely agree with that. And we definitely need to put together more think tanks in order to find solutions to that problem right there. I'd like to go to my co-host now, Angela Sales. Angela, do you have any questions for Dr. Umar Johnson?
Sure, I do. I want to just continue right in this lane that we're in on this questioning of putting in work, because I believe in putting in work, and I believe that your body of work will speak for itself, and I'm in complete agreement. There's a lot of talk going on, very little action, and there's a lot of root causes to that. But Dr. Umar, I know, I've worked with you before, and I know a lot of sisters follow you and, sign up to be part of the work. And, I think my question is, and we kind of responded to it, but a lot of sisters might be showing up because they want to be like Dr. Umar's wife versus actually doing the work. How do you actually filter, be able to filter that out? Or is that even something, that you consider? Because that's a real thing for a single black, handsome, educated, charismatic black man with the potential to be the leader of the black nation. How do you actually kind of work through that process, or is that something that you even, took a look at?
Well, at this stage of the game, having been in organizing for over 20 years now, it's kind of easy to see that. And sometimes that just requires a conversation with the sister as to whether or not the intentions are honorable or dishonorable. I don't have a problem with a sister being interested in me. That's human nature. But is your commitment to the struggle more important than your desire to be with me? Now, if you have a desire to be with me, but your struggle, your interest in the struggle, your love and determination to see African people truly liberated, If that supersedes your attraction to Dr. Umar, I'm good. Because even if she doesn't end up with me, I know that she would not risk the best interest of the movement or the work out of a petty jealousy or not getting what she wanted, because the people are always first. It's always about African family first, AFF. But on the flip side, if you have a sister who's only acting like she wants to do the work because she wants the man, that's a problem. And she may have to be removed, because if she doesn't get the man, since she was never sincerely interested in the work, she will destroy the whole organization on the way out the door, because all she was ever interested in was Dr. Umar Johnson, or any other brother for that matter. And so that's when it becomes a problem. So purely being interested in a man in the organization is not a problem. It's only when the interest in that man supersedes the best interest of the work and who we're working for, which is the benefit of African people. That's the only time it becomes a problem. And so, that just goes with any organization. It's just something that you basically have to work through. But with that being said, I can also say that black women organizationally, I don't care what you look at, whether it's the Nation of Islam, if you look at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, if you look at SNCC, if you look at CORE, if you look at the Freedom Riders, the sit-ins, the Garvey movement, black women have always been, to some extent, the backbone of the procedural work in many black organizations. And I think one of the contradictions today in black consciousness, and I hear it all the time, every city, every state, every country, every continent I go to, and that is, Dr. Umar, we're having trouble because the sisters do all the work and the brothers just want to be out front to be seen. And so that ego of the Negro is leaving the sisters with all the work, where the brothers only showing up when it's time to get on the microphone. And so that's something that has to be worked on as well. But I tell people all the time, if I got to choose between 5 brothers and 5 sisters as it relates to the work, the history has shown us the women are going to do the work. Brothers tend not to do that work unless they're in charge. And that's a big problem that we have, and it's something that we have to work through, which is brothers only wanting to show up when there's an opportunity to be seen, but not when you have to do the behind-the-scenes groundwork. That's a big issue. And then, of course, the other issue that always comes up with brothers as well is that ego, that HNIC syndrome, everyone wanting to be out front, but everybody ain't got the education, they ain't got the articulation, they ain't got the oratory, they ain't got the vision. Not everyone is going to be a leader. Sometimes you need managers, and managers are just as important as leaders, because a manager, they don't have the vision, doesn't have the charisma, but the manager can get the job done. And if we had more brothers who were comfortable being managers and not always trying to be the leader, I think we would have a lot less responsibility to put on the shoulders of our black women.
Do you think sisters have a role? Yeah, definitely. Do you think sisters have a role to play in that process, or should we step out the room and let y'all brothers handle that?
Well, I think sisters' issues should only be handled with sisters, and I think issues that are purely amongst brothers should only be handled with brothers. So if there's an issue with ego or competition amongst men, sisters don't need to be privy to that. And if there's an issue going on with black women, I think that should be handled with the brothers not necessarily being privy to that, because we are all influenced by that opposite gender. And one thing I've had to learn being in psychology as long as I've been in it is that as we get older, we don't necessarily mature out of being influenced by the opposite sex when they're around us. So the way a brother would react to me when there's nothing but men around may be totally different when there's women around, because he may now perceive the need to defend a position, defend an opinion, most of all, defend his ego. And the same thing with black women. A sister will react to another sister totally different when there's no one else around, and totally different when there's no other brothers around. So I think when there's a need for deep conversations that are gender-based, they should be handled exclusively within that gender, which is in standing and in protocol with African culture. That's what we do back home. Men are separated for certain things. Women are separated for certain things, such as the rites of passage.
All right. Brother Daryl, do I have time for one more?
Yeah, go right ahead.
All right. I wanted to thank you, Dr. Umar. That's thorough. I wanted to ask you about this in terms of, do you, as you know, from a psychology and an educator point of view, do you feel that there's a certain age when a boy's moral and principle development, principle PLE, maximizes or plateaus? At some point, a person becomes who they're going to be, at a certain age in terms of what they believe, what their behavior is going to be, just their belief system and how they govern themselves. Do you think it's a certain age where a boy to man or boy's development maximizes when it comes to their moral development or where they stand on principles? And the reason I ask that, because we're going to talk about, brotherhood among the brothers. We have the intergenerational issues, the elders versus young brothers, and, just the variance in behavior from back in the day till now. But is there a certain age or a certain time when the development of that is over with? We got to chalk it? Or do you think that, even from teenage into young man and to adulthood, that a man can still develop his moral platform or his principles?
Well, number one, morals being an aspect of core values, I think that's something that continues to develop across the lifespan. You mentioned the word plateau in terms of spiritual evolution, psychological evolution, human evolution. There is no true, actual plateau. You can only plateau when you've decided to stop working to improve yourself. So there really is no plateau in the human experience unless you choose to have one. Now, for me, I separate morals from principles. I see them as two totally separate things. I think morals often has a judgmental aspect of it and often includes people from the outside in looking in, making a judgment decision without having all the facts. So with me, I try to tread very careful around topics of morals, because it often implies external judgment of a person without having all the information. Principles are different. I definitely ascribe to principles, because what principle says is this is what I stand for and this is what I believe in. You're not necessarily wrong in your conduct, but what you're doing clearly contradicts a principle that I hold true to my heart. And that's why when we come together to organize and struggle with one another, we must always begin the work on a firm foundation of principles of solidarity. There's no way we can work together if we haven't first established principles of solidarity. What are the 5, 10, 15, 20 principles that are going to guide the work that we do together? Transparency, honesty, a need to confront someone you're having an issue with before you start gossiping about them to other people. And I think we need to really solidify our principles of solidarity in order for us to get anywhere in our organizational work, because as we all know, we are inflicted with a degree of self-hatred that is unknown by any human group in modern history. And in order to navigate that self-hatred, while we work for the liberation of our people, we're going to have to make sure that we hold everyone to a high standard of principles of solidarity. But you cannot superimpose those principles. Everyone must agree to them freely out of their own consciousness, and for those who cannot agree with them, they must respectfully be asked to recuse themselves from the process.
Ashe. All right. Thank you, brother. Go ahead, Brother Darrell. Back at you.
Indeed. And you know what? I kind of want to back up a little bit and agree with the fact that, certain things need to be handled within certain groups, especially when it comes to the brothers dealing with other brothers and the ladies dealing with the other ladies. And I appreciate you saying that, Dr. Umar. Now, as we continue to go on into our discussion, I want to talk to you about two things in terms of progress. What does that look like for us while we're still trying to unify? How do you see that as being something that we will be able to concentrate on in the upcoming years in some of the projects and agendas that we're doing together? And also, I wanted to talk about white supremacy and how that's going to be affected, and the resistance that we're actually receiving at this point through a number of different entities, from incarcerations to murder by the police and a number of other issues. Can you talk to us about those particular issues, those particular two?
Certainly. On the issue of progress, I think one of the ways that we can strive to attain more progress in the Black liberation struggle and the Pan-African movement is to make sure that all of our meetings and all of our dealings with each other should be centered around purpose. Purpose. One of the places where we are weak at in our organizational foundation and fiber is purpose. People need to be clear what we are working towards, what we are striving towards. Every meeting should have a purpose. You don't start the meeting without the purpose of this meeting is to achieve X, Y, or Z. Let it be plainly stated so everyone can stay on task with the purpose. What is the purpose for the meeting? What is the purpose for the month? What is the purpose for the quarter? What is the purpose for the year? You break everything down to a purpose. When a president is elected, doesn't matter what country you're talking about, whether it's America or Africa, any country on the continent, they know they're in office for 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. So every year there's a purpose for the year. Then they break that year down. There's a purpose for the first 6 months, the first 30 days, the first 90 days. Goal-driven activity is where we are weak. Too often, organizations founded for a specific purpose that has outcomes that are measurable often ends up disintegrating into another useless intellectual masturbation clinic or think tank. We need think tanks. But the organization that has a purpose cannot also double as the think tank unless you make sure you clearly separate out when that think tank will be held, so you don't have people showing up to a meeting that is about purpose who simply want to entertain each other intellectually. Intellectual entertainment is the quicksand of Black revolution. Intellectual entertainment is causing us to wait 5, 10, 15, 20 years in this struggle without achieving nothing because we have, again, woke people showing up to worker meetings. If you are not a worker, you don't come up here. This meeting is for people who roll up their hands, want to do work, and want to be held accountable. If you are just a work person who wants to worship intellectual discussion, we do have a study group for that. And that's why organizations need study groups, because our people need to dialogue. They need to conversate. I don't want to demoralize intellectualism because I don't think we think deeply enough. I'm simply saying the intellectualism cannot be allowed, to infiltrate the actual practical steps that we need to take as a people. And too often, what do you end up with? You end up with workers at the study group and intellectualizers at the purpose meeting. It should be totally reversed. So you had a study group where you have people saying, I don't want to talk no more, I want to get to work. You shouldn't be here then, brother. This is intellectual here. If you want to be practical, that meeting is Friday. And on the flip side, if you have somebody who just want to talk all day and don't want to get around to responsibilities and roles, wait a minute, brother, this ain't the study group, this is the workers' meeting. So we really need to start delineating between the woke people and where they should be, and then the workers and where they should be.
Putting everybody in their lane and in their job.
Exactly.
I got you.
And don't get mad at them, because another thing we do, Brother Darrell, we come at them like this. Listen, brother, you're intellectual, you don't want to do no work, you're no good to the struggle, get the hell out. That's not good either. We have to always observe decorum with our people. We must always be pleasant with them and patient with them because, after all, we are allergic to working with each other. So rather than beat the brother down, say, hey, brother, I see your strength as ideas. Your strength is in assessing different aspects of history and culture. We would love to have you on this committee. In other words, don't throw the brother out. Don't throw the sister out. That's where they are in their development. They are still in the intellectual phase. They have not evolved into the revolutionary phase, which is work. And, of course, we need both. But the true revolutionary is the intellectual who has now come to understand that nothing changes until I roll up my sleeves. So the revolutionary is a mature intellectual who's ready to put the work with the intellectualism. And if people are not there, respectfully allow them the time needed to grow, but do not throw them away. Find a place for everyone. That's what Garvey did. The Honorable Marcus Garvey found a place for everyone. Wherever you were in your conscious development, he put you in that group. He didn't offend you. He didn't chase you away. He simply found a place where you could be most beneficial to the collective struggle.
Indeed. And, that's something that Brother Cleophas Miller has taught us, the President General of the UNIA. the organization that Marcus Garvey started in 1914 and brought to the United States in 1918. And he talks about that frequently, about putting people in the best opportunity for them to strive and do the best work that they can for the team. And that has significant effects on the team, especially when you don't realize exactly that those people are good at some of the things that they do that you never knew that they could do. And that's just putting people in the right situation to benefit and also to be successful. And thank you for that, Dr. Umar. Again, ladies and gentlemen, you're tuned in to the Team DLW Unity Movement here on the J. King Radio Network. We're speaking with Dr. Umar Johnson, and we're getting a number of things taken care of here. We're talking a little bit about brotherhood and unity, and I want to jump into this particular topic before we start going to the phone lines, Dr. Umar. We talked about white supremacy. And with 40 million black people in this country, it's kind of it kind of makes me wonder why we haven't been able to overcome a number of the issues that are facing us today. And of course, because of the judicial system, the reform that needs to take place there, and a number of other issues. Can you talk to us about white supremacy and how we, as black folks, have a need to not only overcome it, but surpass it and keep thriving in our own communities?
One of the reasons why we have not been able to make more progress against racism, white supremacy in these past 50 years, Brother Darrell, is largely due to the fact that most of our people are not on the same page as it comes to understanding white supremacy. So, for example, the first rule of white supremacy, as I teach, is that all white people are racist, that there are no exceptions. Every white person is a racist. That is the first thing that must be understood before you can understand racism. Having had their consciousness massaged by the church for 400 years, and massaged by the masjid for 400 years, and massaged by mainstream colorblind integrationist leaders for the past 50 years or so, our people have been so brainwashed against seeing racism for what it is that it's hard for us to achieve some sort of unitary view of it, because we have so many black people who are volunteering to rescue white people from the charge that all of them are racist. And then the second part of that, so you have the intellectual aspect of it, which is so many black people are in denial that all white people are racist. And one of the reasons they have that denial is because deep down within most of us, Brother Darrell, we still suffer from psychological inferiority. All the books, all the trips to Egypt, all the dashikis, all the black fest, all the black media, the truth of the matter is the self-esteem of black people has not improved much since the end of slavery, even with the information. And the reason for that is information does not replace conditioning. Your unconscious responds more to repetition than to truth. I want to say that one more time. The human unconscious responds more to repetition than it does to truth. What do I mean by that? I mean, if Brother Darrell sends his son to a white racist private school in Ohio, and they're constantly telling him that Jesus was white and Mary was white and white people are great and black people are not, and Brother Darrell takes his son to the Garvey meeting once a week where he sees a black Jesus and get black truth and get black intellectualism and black power, at the end of the day, who will rule the mind of that child? The public school will. The private school will. Why? Because they simply got to your child's mind more often than you did. The brain is the creature of repetition, and whoever influences most will ultimately control that mind. That's why Adolf Hitler said, come up with a lie. Keep the lie simple. Keep telling the lie over and over again, and you will find that people are irresistible to be able to reject something when they're constantly seeing it and hearing it all the time. So if we want to save
Columbus
the minds of
discovered
African
America,
youth, and in particular African children, we have to come up with a process of repetition. And the only way to constantly present the truth to African children is to build our own schools, and the only way to constantly present truth to African people is to build our own institutions. The brain will respond to repetition much more than truth. The fact that you told the child the truth means nothing. The person telling the lie is telling the lie more often than the person telling the truth.
But once you start telling that truth, you start hearing that truth more often to where you realize it is now the truth, and that repetition becomes the teacher, correct?
Absolutely. We're losing the minds of our children because of the repetition. We haven't institutionalized the truth. That's what school is. School is the institutionalization of your people's truth. So if education is the institutionalization of a people's truth, when you send black children to a white school, for what? Because all you're doing is subjecting them to the internalization of white people's truth.
Right on. Okay.
Wow.
All right. Dr. Umar, we're definitely receiving one heck of a lesson here. And since we're on that, and of course you are tuned in to the show that focuses on educating, elevating, and motivating, let's talk we've talked a little bit about education and elevation. Let's talk a little bit about the motivation now. We have a little bit of a problem, it seems, with our younger people, our younger generation, disrespecting our elders or their elders. Of course, because there's a lack of discipline in the home, the lack of fathers in the home, and a number of other entities that's missing from these children's development. But how do we overcome? What's the solution to overcoming these issues in order to bridge the gap between the generations? How can we have a collaboration amongst the generations to get these younger Thundercats, so to speak, into a level to where they're learning from their elders, taking that experience and being able to utilize it in their day-to-day life? What's the steps? What's the plan of action for us getting that accomplished?
Well, there's a couple of things. One of the biggest reasons for the breakdown in the intergenerational level of respect that used to exist within the African community, one of the reasons for that was the decentralization of fatherhood in the black community. In the 1970s and 1980s, when the United States government came into our communities and deindustrialized the communities and then turned around and began to mass incarcerate the fathers in the 1980s, when you took that father out of the home and when you took that father out of the community, number one, that became a breeding ground for teenage pregnancy. And one thing we need to understand about teenage pregnancy is when a child has a child, and that child now has the responsibility of parenting a child, which is an adult responsibility, that child now begins to see themselves as an adult. And then when their parents don't want to take responsibility that you're the reason your daughter got pregnant, and then they shun that girl, or not shun her, but tell her you're now responsible for raising your child because you made it, not me, failing to recognize that you created the circumstances that brought the teenage pregnancy into existence, that child now considers themselves equal to the adults. So in the black community, when a 14-year-old girl has a baby, in her mind, she is an adult, because in her mind, she now has the same responsibility to her baby, even though she's only 14, that her mother has to her, who may be 45 or 50 years old. So teenage pregnancy on the female side has done a lot to destroy the intergenerational respect that existed between youth and elder. On the female side, on the masculine side, we have an issue with the hip-hop community as well as the drug culture on a separate, different level, has created a situation where the black male youth have been able to create and procreate financially more than the elders, which to some extent made the elder black men in the community dependent upon his son and his grandson for his sustenance. So remember, back in the 1980s, the black church was against gangster rap. They were not against hip-hop, but they were against gangster rap. If there was lyrics that misogynized women, if there was lyrics that promoted drug dealing, drug selling, sexual exploitation of women, murdering other black men, it was challenged by the black church. But then the white music company stepped in and told the black gangster rappers, hey, if you give those churches some money, they will then turn to a source of support as opposed to a source of objection. So the rappers started financing the churches and giving grants to the community, and so now you never hear a black church speaking out against gangster rap. So on the masculine side, you have a situation where the millionaires in our community are under 30 years old. And so the elders often feel powerless or too thirsty, and they want some of that millionaire young hip-hop artist money or some of that billionaire young ghetto drug lord money, that they're willing to turn a blind eye to the wrongs that are done by some of our young black men, but not all of them. They're willing to turn a blind eye to some of the wrongs of young black men in exchange for some finance. So we have a rule of money in the black community. Money has replaced ethics, and money has replaced principle in our community. And that is at the essence of the rotting of the moral fiber of the black community.
Wow. Thank you very much, Doctor.
At the end of the day, it's about dimes and nickels, and we don't want to be honest about it.
Well, I hear you. Well, we definitely going to be honest about it on this show, on the Team DLW Unity Movement. I got two other questions real quick, and you can answer these in a minute or less, and then I believe Angela might have another question or comment, and I'll have to, we'll go to the phone lines, get a couple of comments from a couple of our people. So I'm going to say a word. I'm going to say two words in each one of these people, and I just want you in a minute or less sum up that particular person. Kanye West.
Kanye West, post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of losing his mother, okay, as well as major depressive disorder with psychotic features. I believe the brother needs treatment, so I am in no way, shape, form, or fashion harmed or offended by his statements because it's coming from a man who's broken.
And he needs help. And we need to get him help.
And he needs to get it.
Indeed. Another two words. Bill Cosby.
My North Philadelphia brother who unfortunately made a mistake that too many black celebrities make, and that is getting to a certain level in your success and in your stardom and in your age where you start thinking that some of the privileges of white people are now going to be accorded to you. Bill Cosby should have never gotten as comfortable as he did with those white women. Although some of those allegations may be true, most of them I believe are false. And the reason I believe that is there is no rational reason that can explain why a white woman sexually harassed by the most powerful black television personality in American history, she's harassed by him, and she doesn't tell a soul for 15 years, 25 years, 35 years, and in some cases 50 years. It makes no sense. A white woman benefiting from white privilege could have had Bill Cosby destroyed a long time ago. You wait until he's out of his prime, and then you try to destroy him. This whole thing was concocted and created to destroy a legacy.
And I totally believe that. We are definitely in agreement on that. Thank you so much. And now, Dr. Umar, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask Angela Sells if she has any final questions, and then we'll go to the phone lines. Got a couple of people, I'm sure, that has raised their hand and want to speak to you. Sister Angela.
Sure.
Right. Two questions, Doc. One, is there an organizational, business, or nation-building model that you would recommend that has been effective, or do we have to create a model? I know you mentioned, Marcus Garvey and Garveyism, and of course we do have his example. But is there any other model that we can look to as we build that has been effective?
I think that's a good question, and I would say in the short term, we need to create those models. Let's be clear about something. The black leadership model for the past 50 years has been based on charismatic leadership relating to the leader's connection to a great historical black personality. So if you look at Minister Louis Farrakhan, okay, he walked with Malcolm, he walked with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Part of his legitimacy stems from the fact, a great part of his legitimacy stems from the fact that he walked with two great men. Jesse Jackson walked with Dr. King. He walked with a strong black male. Al Sharpton at one time had connections to Jesse, and then, of course, he was with James Brown. When you look at most of the leaders of the past 40, 50 years, most of whom are now elders now, part of the legitimacy came that they knew a great hero. But this is now the 21st century. Most of us will never be able to claim I knew a great hero. I'm related to Frederick Douglass by blood, but I never knew him in the flesh. So to some extent, I probably benefit from that same privilege in having a direct ancestral connection to probably the greatest black leader to walk American soil. Most people don't have that. So we need to build models of leadership that are devoid of charismatics and devoid of connection to a great hero, because we don't have one. And because we don't have that anymore, I think leading black people may become more difficult without a very strong model. Because for the past 40, 50 years, you could hypnotize a black person just by saying, I knew so-and-so. You could hypnotize a black person just by saying, I walk with so-and-so. There's no longer the benefit of social hypnosis. Now, if you're leading, you have to lead with tangible results. So in terms of your statement that we need to create models, I definitely think we need to create models, because the charismatic leader connected to a great hero no longer exists. And the other thing I would say is that the models we create must be related to the purpose of that organization. So the leadership model from the leadership model of the hospital may be totally different from the leadership model of the brothers and sisters who are going to be doing community patrol, keeping us alive at night. So I think the model must lend itself directly to the purpose of that particular movement.
Overstood. And my last question, so are there any organizations or individuals that you would recognize today that effectively promotes unity? Is there anybody you would work with, are working with, or be willing to work with to advance our unity movement?
I work with a lot of people on the grassroots level who don't have names per se. They're not on YouTube running their mouth 25 hours a day doing no work at all. You know, as most people in the conscious community, YouTube is what they do. They do nothing outside of it. And so I deal with a lot of brothers and sisters on the ground. That's who I work with, because I hate to say this, but a lot of people with established personalities in the conscious community, they're not workers. They're just conscious celebrities. They don't do work. They make money, they talk, they give opinion, but they are not workers. 99% of people with a YouTube platform are not interested in doing any work, and I cannot say that enough. It is financial, it is social, and that is all. And so I've learned that, in being in this work. So I work on the grassroots level, but in terms of people with names, obviously Dr. Claude Anderson comes to mind. Malik Zulu Shabazz is doing some good work out of Washington, D.C. There are brothers and sisters out there who do have a platform who are doing good work, like the two brothers I just named, and there are a few others. But for me, I'm investing in the nameless grassroots leader, because they are the ones who do not have a conflict of interest when it comes to serving their people. They don't have to choose between followers and likes and money and all of that. They can purely focus on helping the people. So I work with the grassroots folks.
So, Dr. Umar, would you be willing at some point to, publish a Dr. Umar list? Because we need to connect the black dots. We here in Cleveland, you might have people here, people there, and they true to the game, and we need to find each other. Can you be a catalyst or a source just by, simply putting it out there or sharing that so that we can work together? That would be my last thing.
Without question, I'm actually working on that. To be honest with you guys, one of the things that's really holding me up right now is this Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy school building. We could have had about 4 or 5 of them by now, but the Catholic Church seems to be one of my greatest nemesis as it relates to acquiring a school property. There's been about 5 different schools that we had the money to buy, good condition, and they pulled out at the last minute once they found out that I was the purchaser. That happened to us in Mount Vernon, New York. It happened to us in Detroit, Michigan. It happened to me right outside of Cleveland. In fact, I was going to lease a school. What is that, Cleveland Heights? What is that city right outside of Cleveland? Something Heights.
Well, you definitely got Cleveland Heights. You got East Cleveland, and a number
Cleveland
of other
Catholic school out there, clean Catholic school. And I was ready to lease it. I was on my way to Cleveland, and then they pulled out when they found out who I was. I'm going through the same thing right now in New Jersey. So it has been a hell of a struggle to try to get a building. Even when I sent someone else in as the front man, they sooner or later ended up finding out that I'm the one who's going to be writing that check. And it's amazing because there's a lesson in this, though. Not for me, because I've already learned it, but there's a lesson in it for our people. Black people have this thing where they say white people care about money more than racism. That is totally incorrect. Because if white people cared more about money than racism, Umar Johnson would have a school by now, because Umar Johnson has the money for the school. They care more about the racism. In other words, they're willing to deny the money. Almost $1 million. They're willing to deny the money just to make sure that my curriculum never gets put into the heads of our children. So anyone who thought that white people worship green more than skin color, they're absolutely incorrect.
But brother, we got to be slicker to them. We need to figure that out.
About that. Exactly. We really need to talk about that, because there's some possibilities here in Cleveland and around the city of Cleveland, Northeast Ohio, where there is some strong possibilities that can be done.
You know, schools
we have a number of black mayors. Exactly. Well, we have a number of black mayors in Northeast Ohio that I'm sure would be interested. And and I say that because we're working with several of them on a number of different levels to get some things done. So that may fall in line of some of the things that we're looking to accomplish.
Let me know. If it's schools to be seen, I can see them when I'm up there in Cleveland. While I'm there. And, of course, we want everybody to come on out next Friday, May 18th, the night before El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, Malcolm X's Earth Day. Friday, May 18th, African American Museum of Cleveland. Dr. Umar Johnson will be in the building. The doors open up at 5. Lecture begins at 7. It'll be my first visit there in about 2-3 years. So please come on out. But again, if anyone knows of any schools available in the Cleveland area, let me know ASAP, because I will definitely work those school visits into my visit to Cleveland next week.
Well,
and we also want to let people know I'm in Baltimore, Brother Darrell, if I can. I'll be in Baltimore,
one more
Maryland.
Time. I didn't hear you.
Yes, sir. I'll be in Baltimore, Maryland this coming Saturday, the 12th, and I'll be doing my For Sisters Only Relationships and Self-Resurrection Seminar. So we're inviting all black women out to Baltimore, Maryland, Saturday, May the 12th. The doors open up at 6, lecture at 7, and then I'm in D.C. the very next day, which is Mother's Day. So after you take your mother to breakfast or lunch, bring her on out to the Thurgood Marshall Center in Washington, D.C., and I'm going to be doing a lecture on the state of black America, Africans versus everybody, and then it's off to Cleveland for Friday night's main event, May 18th, at the African American Museum.
Right. Well, you definitely stay busy, and we look forward to having you here in Cleveland the week of the 18th. Again, Dr.
You want to hit a few calls, Brother Darrell?
Yeah, let's see if anyone, if we got time, if anyone would like to ask Dr. Umar a question, just give us a call at 515-605-9376 and hit the 1 if you're already on the board. I see we got several callers on the board right now, quite a few of them. And if you're looking to make a comment or you have a question for Dr. Umar, please hit the 1 and come on in. I'm going to go to one of our next guests. This is Brother Baba Victor B. Gibson. Welcome to the Team DLW Unity Movement, sir. How are you?
I'm doing fine. As long as I'm above ground, I'm doing good. Hey, Angela, how's everything on your end, sister?
I'm doing fabulous. Thank you, Baba Victor. Love you. Thanks for calling in.
Well,
Being part of the show today.
Well, basically one quick question. I took a lot of notes, but one of the things when we got to the point of solution, he talked about the matrix trap, where he alluded to that no one really wants to take the responsibility for implementation of solutions. And I thought, wow, that's pretty much where it is, because we do like to stay on the intellectual basis because it's easy. But to your guest, as a former teacher who developed and worked in the African curriculum as we started in Detroit in the 1990s, you're talking about doing your school. I understand you got your building name, and that's fine. But how do you plan on getting the staff, your organizational staff? I mean, buildings are fine, and we got a lot of buildings with good people's names on them, but the actual work, as you say, needs to be done by the teachers, the staff, and those who are going to be in there. How are you going to train and collect those staff who are consciously ready, not just to know the intellectual aspect of African Center or the dialogue for teaching and raising and turning our babies around, but also with the skill sets to do it? How are you going to get them? Because it costs money. We have a lot of schools who started homeschooling, and I'm saying, okay, that's fine. We got some volunteer schools here in Detroit, the independent freedom schools. But my question is, how are you going to pay those men, especially black males, to come in there and do the job they need to do, but also be able to go home with a check that would say, family, here's how we're going to keep the lights on, here's how we're going to keep the gas on. So I think staffing these places is going to be very crucial. So how are you going to go about getting that?
Good question. Number one, I will not give out my full business plan. So that's number one.
Gotcha.
Number two, though, it's not difficult at all. Having been in education for 20 years, having been both a building principal and a building vice principal, I'm very savvy and well experienced and well educated as it relates to school finance and operations. So that's actually the easy part for me. The toughest part of my job is, what do I tell all the parents whose children I am not yet able to receive because the building capacity cannot accommodate that number of students? That's the biggest challenge I'm going to have. In terms of attracting the staff, as of today, I believe I've received over 5,000 resumes from brothers and sisters all across the world who want to come and work at the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy. I don't think we've ever had an independent school receive that many requests for employment. So that's going to be the easy part. I will have to weed through them, so I do agree with you. You do have to make sure you get the right people, the right personnel. Yeah. The good thing, though, because I have been in education as long as I've been in it, I have some tried and tested loyalists and educators and elder educators who will be there with me every step of the way. So my internal team, is quote unquote Trump tight, if you would, the internal team, and then it's just a matter of doing all the interviews and getting all the people. But if I was to open up today or tomorrow, I'm in a pretty good place in terms of who I'll be interviewing, and from that group that I'll be interviewing, I'm in a pretty good place in terms of the final selections. But when we open up Fdmg, we don't plan to start big, not at all. The first year, I'm looking at no more than 8 classes. I want to perfect my method first before we grow the school. And then ultimately, we're going to, quote-unquote, franchise it, meaning we're going to have to replicate the design all across the country and all across the world, for that matter. Had not most of my donations come from America, I probably would be putting the first school in Africa, hands down, because the value on education is so much greater there than it is here, unfortunately, due to such things as us as a people overvaluing athletic talent, sports, and entertainment above education. But nonetheless, I think the question is a valid one. It's a good one, but I think that we definitely have our bases covered when it comes to the staff and the selection of that staff.
Okay,
great question. Thank you, sir. And if there's anyone else who has a question, please hit the 1, and that basically raises your hand and let me know that you have a question or a comment. And if there isn't any more questions and comments, then we would like to thank Dr. Umar Johnson once again for coming into the Team DLW Unity Movement and participating with us with this wonderful lecture, great information. And if you didn't have your pencils and pens out, ladies and gentlemen, you got to listen to the show again. All you got to do is just wait till the show is over, 5-10 minutes afterwards, and hit the link, and it goes directly back to the show, and it'll replay for you anytime, any place, as long as you have a internet outlet, of course. And Dr. Umar, once again, can you tell our listening audience where you're going to be in the next up and coming weeks beginning in Cleveland or ending in Cleveland over the next couple of weeks? That information again.
Yes, sir. We will begin in Baltimore this coming Saturday, May the 12th, for Sisters Only, Relationships and Dating Seminar. Doors at 6. That's in Baltimore. The very next day, Thurgood Marshall Center, State of the Race. Where are we as a people? Africans versus everybody. That's open to the entire community on Mother's Day. Bring your mother so she can have an intellectual insurrection. And then it's off to Cleveland. Friday night's main event, Friday, May the 18th, at the African American Museum in Cleveland. Doors open up at 5, keynote at 7. And then after that, I'll be off to Johannesburg, South Africa, to speak at National Youth Day, June 15th. And then after that, I'll be at the University of the Bahamas in Freeport, Bahamas, in the Caribbean, to keynote a Pan-African conference there. And that's Saturday, June the 30th, at the University of the Bahamas. If anyone needs to reach me, Dr. Umar Johnson at yahoo.com or 8444 Dr. Umar. Please continue to send in your Fdmg donations, payable to Fdmg Academy, P.O. Box 6872, Philadelphia, PA 19132. And also you can send your resume in. Yes, we've gotten over 5,000, but yours might be the one we need. Send your resume to fdmgresumes@gmail.com.
Right on, right on. And real quick before we get out of here, Dr. Umar, I got one last person who wants to comment or ask you a quick question. And this brother is definitely one of the workers. He is the founder of Black Votes Matter, Brother Nate Simpson. Brother Nate?
Hey, how was everybody doing? Hey, Dr. Umar. Hey, Angie. Hey, Daryl.
Peace.
Brother Umar, I truly appreciate the way you've distinguished, workers using the same metaphor like bees and ants and knowing how to compartmentalize each of those. I've written a couple of great platforms. Most recently, I've used a protocol called the I Believe in You program, which we were able to take 2 magnet schools that were slated for closure, and we were able to get the contract or get the agreement from the state of Ohio, which they were able to match for a lobbying vote for issue 2, and that issue was to generate $250 million, and then the state would come in and match those funds at 250, which was an accumulation of $500 million. I still have the slate for that we used to do that, and I was also a PTA, which is now the FPO president of 3 schools, actually, in doing so. So I don't really get into all of my background and my pedigree, but I do understand how you've been able to methodically distinguish those categories and compartmentalize them. So my question is, in moving forward, what is your biggest hurdle that you think is prohibiting you from being able to do what you need to do over the next year to make sure that it does have closure, so therefore you have those things going forward?
The biggest thing is acquisition of the building itself, and more particularly trying to acquire the building without them necessarily knowing who I am. Because once they learn who I am, the negotiations stop. They get frozen or they cease. And so that has been the problem. That has been the biggest obstacle.
Okay. That's really where I want to start at then. What I'm going to do, I'm going to ask Daryl to give you my number, my direct number that he has, and we're going to be able to. I do have a couple of very influential and powerful constituents that we can expedite that for you, and maybe Brother Shell or Shield, so therefore you can be able to do what you need to do, and that's all I'm gonna say, because I believe in covert dialogues, and I don't think everything that needs to be said over media dialogues as well.
True.
All right. Well, this is going to be another opportunity to connect the dots to get some things done. And, hey, we might come back on Time for Some Action, where action speaks louder than words, where we're talking about some things that just got accomplished just through that conversation alone. All right. Thank you very much, Brother Nate. I greatly appreciate that. And Dr. Umar, it's been an extreme honor and pleasure to have you here on the Team DLW Unity Movement. We got to make sure that you bring you back real soon. And I think Angela wanted to say something real quick before we let you go as well. Angela?
Dr. Umar, we love you. We respect you. We can't wait for you to come back to Cleveland. We'll see you on the 18th. And keep doing what you're doing, brother.
Thank you.
All right. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Umar Johnson, thank you, sir.
Peace and love, black man.
All right. Amen. Amen. I say, those are two words that I normally don't put together, but hey, I say right on. Hey, you're still tuned in to the Team DLW Unity Movement. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to continue with the breakdown, the rest of our show with